There's this scene in the Old Testament where Jacob wrestles with an angel. He's wrestling with God, actually, which is quite an interesting... That's what Israel means, right? Wrestling with God. But I think of marriage the same way. Like people think, well, they lived happily ever after. It's like, that's not what you want in a marriage.
Yeah.
You want someone to contend with, you know, because you learn through that wrestling, you know, like you learn where you're an idiot and where you should stop being and vice versa. So that's the spiritual aspect of marriage. It's the fact that you have to contend with someone under all sorts of circumstances, theoretically it's a manner of promoting psychological, or you could say spiritual growth. And it's genuine. You know, that's why marriage is a sacrament in most human communities, right? It's for most people a pathway to insanity.
To describe to you is how you determine how upset you should be when something anomalous happens. Because it's really hard to figure out, especially if you're unsophisticated in dispute settlement with an intimate partner. Every little bump in the relationship is the potential dissolution of the entire relationship. That's actually why people get married, you know, just so you know. This is built into marital vows. I'm not leaving, ever, no matter what. It's like, okay, well, that definitely puts a boundary around our arguments, right? Because I can't say every time you manifest one of your flaws, which you're likely to do just as often as me, well, enough of this. It's like, that's horrible, man. If your whole life is, well, every time you get out of line, I'm out of here. Well, who knows? It could just come to an end at any moment. It's like, you know, people say, well, if the possibility of divorce is open, it makes you free. It's like, yeah, that's what you want. You want to be free, eh? Really? Really? So you can't predict anything. That's what you're after. It's a vow. And it says, look, I know that you're trouble. Me too. So we won't leave, no matter what happens. Well, that's a hell of a vow, but that's why it's a vow, right? That's why you take it in front of a bunch of people. That's why it's supposed to be a sacred act. It's like, what's the alternative? Because it might be, okay, well, I'm stuck with you. So how about we fix things?
The psychoanalysts used to think that, and we all think this way in some ways, that you're sane because you're well put together. Your psyche is well structured, right? It's internal, somehow inside your head. Well, the first thing is to decide if that is really what you want. And there's some truth in that, but here's a more accurate viewpoint, I think. You outsource most of your sanity because it's too complicated. And so what you do is your parents raise you to be vaguely acceptable to other people. And then you're surrounded by other people your whole life. And then every time you go off the rails a little bit, even just a little bit, people signal to you. Like you make a joke, it's not that funny, and people don't laugh. And you think, oh, you know, I should probably rethink my sense of humor a little bit or pay more attention. Or you tell a rambling story and you notice that everyone's like lost in the distance. And so if you're civilized enough so that people don't shun you, and you have people around you, then they're going to be always telling you how to not be too insane. Well, if you're alone, you drift. You drift, you know, and you'll drift in the direction of your biggest weakness. And so part of the reason for a relationship is sexual contact, obviously. You don't necessarily need a relationship for that. That's not the reason to be with someone. The reason to be with someone, when there's a lot of them, kids who have two parents do far better, period. Crystal clear. Doesn't mean that there aren't many single parents who struggle to do a wonderful job. That's not the same thing. It's an average issue. It's a lot of work to have kids. You know, you kind of need to divide up the labor, especially in the first year or two, you know, because a woman is completely overwhelmed in the first year and she needs somebody around to take care of her while she's taking care of the kid, fundamentally, or at least that's the way it looks to me. So there's that. You need the stable basis for children, and it takes them a long time to mature, and they need to learn that relationships are trustworthy, right? So there's utility and stability there. You kind of want to tangle your life together with someone, you know, because, well, it's like two ropes that are tangled together. It's stronger, especially during times of weakness. And you have two brains instead of one, and that actually turns out to be really helpful when things are complicated. And it builds a solidity into your life and a reality into your life to have someone who's along with you on this very long voyage. And so I think that deepens your life in a way that isn't really possible with fragmentary relationships as a single person.
Definitely.
And then there's more to it than that.
The secret to anything, I think, holding to the rod. If you hold to the rod and don't give up when things are hard, There's always a way through. President Hinckley always said it, that this will pass and that things will get better. And things always do get better.
So you have to be patient and loving and see where it goes.
Yeah.
You're going to have ups and downs, but it's worth it.
You cannot change someone to fit the mold you want them to be.
I just respect his space and he respects my space.
Defy your relationships with them, and I'm not saying to do this in a manipulative way, it won't work. But if they do something that's promoting harmony and peace and goodwill, it's like, tend to it, tell them that you noticed. It's like, it's so useful. And you have to get rid of your grudges and your resentment to do that, right? Because you don't, you're kind of mad at your sister, and then you notice she does something good. You think, there's no goddamn way I'm going to reward her for that. So you ignore her when she does something good. It's like, that's brilliant, that is. Because then you've just punished her for doing what you want.
You can't do that. You have to prioritize the relationship. Like, my observation clinically has been, for a couple to maintain their relationship without it deteriorating, they have to spend 90 minutes a week together talking about their lives, about how the house is run, about what they've all been doing, to keep their stories caught up, right? And then they need to spend at least one time having a date, and 2 is better. You can't aim for a lot more than that because, life is very busy, and if it's going to be sustainable, it has to be realistic. They need to make time for each other twice a week and talk in a non-romantic way, just practically about the domestic economy and about everything that's going on. And that keeps people tied to each other and updated. And so that's sort of your minimal commitment level if you don't want things to deteriorate.
And the same with the relationship. It's not about the events. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. You go to the dentist twice a year, your teeth will fall out. You have to brush your teeth every day for 2 minutes. What does brushing your teeth twice a day for 2 minutes do? Nothing. Unless you do it every day, twice a day for 2 minutes. Right? It's the consistency. Going to the gym for 9 hours does not get you into shape. Working out every day for 20 minutes gets you into shape. But it's the daily practice of all the monotonous, little, boring things like brushing your teeth that matter the most. She didn't fall in love with you because you remembered her birthday and bought her flowers on Valentine's Day. She fell in love with you because when you woke up in the morning, you said good morning to her before you checked your phone. She fell in love with you because when you went to the fridge to get yourself a drink, you got her one without even asking. She fell in love with you because when you had an amazing day at work and she came home and she had a terrible day at work, you didn't say, yeah, but let me tell you about my day. You sat and listened to her awful day and you didn't say a thing about your amazing day. This is why she fell in love with you.
And this is kind of along the same lines. People aren't who you want them to be. They are who they are. And you can't confuse those things. And you can't think that you're going to take someone who is the way they are and change them into who you want them to be.
What I really liked about Beauty and the Beast, and I do think that's the best Disney movie ever made, was that it's a real female hero myth. I mean, the woman, Beauty, is beautiful, so she's high up in the female dominance hierarchy, but she's witty and well-read and intelligent and adventurous and brave and courageous and truthful, all of that. And she doesn't fall for Gaston, the psychopathic persona. And young women are much more likely to fall for men like that, by the way, than women who are slightly more, what would you say?
Mature.
And wiser. So they'll fall for dark triad men, and that's partly how psychopathy propagates itself across the generations. Right? They can be enticed by psychopathic personas. But she prefers the Beast. It's like, well, the Beast is the adventure. It's like, well, is this terrible man, like he's rough, he's unhued, but he's got potential, right? And that's what really attracts her. And she wants someone who can guard the walls and make a safe haven for the children, but who's generous enough who's productive enough to be useful and generous enough to share. And so she civilizes him. And that's, you say, well, that's the female hero myth.